Before this prayer is even spoken out loud, something shifts in the unseen realm. There are moments when heaven goes silent, not because God is absent, but because divine authority is about to be released. Psalm 35 is not a gentle whisper. It is a legal summons in the courts of heaven, a declaration that calls God himself to arise and contend. When this prayer is released, darkness recognizes it immediately. This is why the atmosphere changes when Psalm 35 is prayed with understanding. It is not just words on lips. It is alignment with divine justice. Forces that operate in secrecy, manipulation, and spiritual interference do not fear noise. They fear authority. And Psalm 35 carries authority rooted in righteousness, not human anger. Many people pray hoping something will happen. Psalm 35 is prayed knowing something must happen. It is the difference between begging and standing, between pleading and proclaiming. When this prayer is released, it does not ask darkness for permission. It announces heaven's verdict. This is why witches tremble, not because of the person praying, but because of the God who responds. Psalm 35 calls upon the Lord as defender, advocate, and judge. It exposes hidden opposition and brings divine light into secret places where plans were formed in silence. Darkness thrives in concealment, but Psalm 35 is confrontational. It does not negotiate with hidden works. It demands divine intervention. It speaks directly to unjust opposition and calls for God to step into the situation personally. That is terrifying to any force that relies on secrecy. If you have ever felt attacked without explanation, opposed without cause, or resisted, no matter how pure your intentions were, this prayer was written for moments like that. Psalm 35 was born in a season where the enemy operated behind the scenes, and only divine justice could bring resolution. This is not a prayer for revenge. This is a prayer for vindication. There is a difference. Revenge says, I will act. Vindication says, God, you act. And when God acts, every counterfeit power is exposed. The reason this prayer is feared is because it hands the battle back to God. It removes human weakness from the equation and replaces it with divine authority. The moment Psalm 35 is released, control shifts and darkness knows it. Some prayers ask God to comfort you in the storm. Psalm 35 asks God to enter the storm as a warrior of justice. It declares that innocent blood, stolen peace, and hidden oppression will not go unanswered. That is why resistance intensifies before breakthrough. When this prayer is prayed, hidden structures begin to collapse quietly. Plans unravel, influence weakens. Not because of fear, but because truth has arrived. What witches fear most about Psalm 35 is not the words, it is the alignment. This prayer aligns the believer with divine order. It exposes every illegal spiritual operation working without God's permission. And once exposed, those operations lose power. Psalm 35 calls God into the situation as witness. And when God becomes the witness, lies cannot stand. Accusations fall apart. Manipulations lose their grip. What was done in secret begins to surface without effort. This prayer does not chase darkness. Darkness flees when justice speaks. That is the power of Psalm 35. It does not shout, it authorizes heaven to move. Why Psalm 35 disrupts hidden operations and breaks spiritual monitoring. When Psalm 35 is released consistently, something unusual begins to happen. Opposition loses coordination. This is because this prayer does not merely resist evil, it interrupts it. Systems that relied on timing, surveillance, and influence suddenly find themselves confused, delayed, and weakened. That disruption is not accidental. It is the result of divine interference. Many forms of spiritual opposition depend on observation. They watch patterns, seasons, emotions, and moments of vulnerability. But Psalm 35 destabilized those systems by shifting authority away from the observer and placing it back into God's hands. When the Lord becomes the one who pleads the case, every unauthorized watcher is dismissed. This is why the prayer creates pressure in the unseen realm. Psalm 35 does not ask God to look away from injustice. It insists that God look directly at it. And once heaven's attention is focused, no hidden work can continue comfortably. What terrifies dark operations most is that Psalm 35 exposes motives. It separates false accusations from truth. It reveals who stirred opposition, who whispered lies, and who benefited from confusion. Darkness fears exposure more than confrontation. The prayer dismantles spiritual leverage. Anything built on fear, intimidation, or manipulation begins to lose strength. That is why people often notice emotional relief before visible breakthrough, because the spiritual grip has already been broken. If you've ever wondered why some battles refuse to end despite prayer, Psalm 35 explains it clearly. Some conflicts require divine judgment, not human effort. This prayer invites God to deal with what you cannot confront directly. Psalm 35 removes you from the role of defender and places God there instead. And when God defends, he does so with accuracy. Nothing excessive, nothing missing, only what justice demands. This is why persistence matters. Each time this prayer is released, authority is reinforced. The unseen realm recognizes consistency as commitment. Resistance weakens not because of repetition, but because alignment deepens. Witches tremble because Psalm 35 cancels permissions they relied on. Any access gained through deception, accusation, or spiritual loopholes is revoked when God steps in as judge. What was once allowed is suddenly illegal. The prayer also silences voices that spoke against you in the unseen. Accusations lose credibility, influence fades, and those who benefited from your oppression begin to experience the same pressure they once released. This is not karma. This is order being restored. Psalm 35 does not curse, it corrects, and correction is devastating to systems built on imbalance. Many testimonies begin quietly after this prayer. Conflicts dissolve without explanation. People change without confrontation. Doors open where resistance once stood. These are signs that the battle was already settled in the unseen. When Psalm 35 is sustained, the opposition eventually retreats, not loudly but completely. Because once heaven has ruled, there is nothing left to fight for. When God answers Psalm 35, divine reversal and silent victory. When God begins to answer Psalm 35, the first sign is not noise, it is order. Chaos that once surrounded your life starts to lose its grip. Situations that felt tangled begin to untangle without explanation. This is because divine justice does not rush. It rearranges everything precisely. Psalm 35 activates reversal. What was meant to weaken you begins to strengthen you. What drained you emotionally starts to restore you. God does not merely stop opposition, he repositions the righteous. And this repositioning is what darkness cannot predict. One of the most unsettling things for hidden opposition is when their efforts no longer produce results. Psalm 35 creates this effect. Pressure that once worked stops working. Fear tactics fail. Manipulation loses traction. The believer stands not because they became stronger, but because God stepped in. This is why victory often comes quietly. There is no announcement, no confrontation, just sudden peace where tension used to live. That peace is evidence that the verdict has already been issued in the unseen realm. Psalm 35 does something rare. It transfers emotional weight off your shoulders. You stop reacting, you stop explaining, you stop defending yourself. When God takes over, human striving becomes unnecessary, and that is deeply unsettling to those who thrived on provoking you. Reversal also exposes loyalty. People who stood against you begin to distance themselves from the conflict. Some withdraw, Some change their tone, some disappear entirely. This is not coincidence. It is alignment correcting itself. God's justice does not humiliate, it clarifies. It reveals truth without shouting. And once truth is visible, opposition collapses under its own weight. The answer to Psalm 35 does not always look like punishment. It often looks like removal. God removes influence, access, and authority from those who misused it. This is why witches fear this prayer, because it ends control without confrontation. You may notice that the battle no longer feels personal. Emotional triggers lose their power. Old wounds stop reopening. That emotional detachment is not apathy, it is freedom. And freedom is proof that the spiritual case has been closed. Psalm 35 also restores confidence, not pride but assurance. You begin to move forward without fear of unseen resistance. This is the mark of divine clearance, when the path ahead no longer feels blocked. When God answers, He also protects the outcome. What He restores cannot be stolen again through the same methods. That is why former tactics stop working permanently. Calm. This is not temporary relief. It is structural change. The unseen framework that allowed opposition to operate has been dismantled. And when that framework collapses, darkness retreats. Not because it wants to, but because it must. The sealing of victory, divine protection, and a final declaration. When Psalm 35 has done its work, what remains is not tension, but stability. This prayer does not end with relief alone, it establishes protection. God does not simply resolve the conflict, He secures the territory afterwards. That is why the peace that follows feels firm, not fragile. One of the greatest signs that Psalm 35 has been answered is continuity. Life begins to move forward without interruption. Progress no longer stalls. Joy no longer feels threatened. This is because divine justice does not leave gaps for the same opposition to return. Psalm 35 teaches the believer how to stand after victory. Not in pride, not in fear, but in quiet confidence. When God has defended you, you do not need to keep looking over your shoulder. Heaven has already gone ahead of you. And this is what hidden opposition fears most. Not just defeat, but permanence. Psalm 35 does not create temporary setbacks for darkness. It establishes boundaries that cannot be crossed again through the same means. After this prayer, discernment sharpens. You recognize resistance sooner. You no longer internalize opposition. You respond with wisdom instead of reaction. That clarity is part of the answer. It is how God prevents future attacks. Psalm 35 also restores voice. You speak without hesitation. You move without second guessing. Confidence returns, not because circumstances changed, but because authority was restored. What witches fear most about Psalm 35 is that once God rules, there is no appeal. The verdict stands, influence ends, control dissolves, and the righteous walk forward untouched by what once pursued them. This prayer does not demand chaos, it establishes order. It does not summon fear, it produces peace. And peace is the ultimate evidence that God has intervened. If you are listening to this right now, understand this clearly. You were never meant to fight unseen battles alone. Psalm 35 exists because God defends those who cannot defend themselves. Let this truth settle in your spirit. What rose against you without cause cannot remain. Not because you resisted harder, but because God stood in your place. And as you move forward from this moment, may your path remain clear, your peace remain guarded, and your confidence remain rooted in this truth. When Psalm 35 is released, heaven responds, and what God settles stays settled.